the issue of conflict, which I believe is a topic that we have been discussing here this afternoon, I mean, I'd like to start by obviously acknowledging the sad reality that we are witnessing rising conflicts of various scales just about all around the world. And more often than not, these conflicts are described and labeled religious or cultural, fueling this belief that was made famous by Huntington as early as 1992 when he started talking about the clash of civilization. As we all know, it's a hypothesis that deals with the idea that people's culture and religious beliefs will be at the primary source of conflict in the post-Cold War era. But a few decades after this, when we really look and analyze in more details the root causes of the major recent conflicts and look beyond the claims of the perpetrators, what we rapidly understand is that issues of poverty, hopelessness, disillusion, inequality, lack of opportunities, lack of empowerment are more often the real reasons why people end up fighting. And just yesterday, I'm sure you followed the news, the UK Prime Minister gave us an eloquent example of this when she declared that it was wrong to call the tragic Westminster Bridge attack perpetrated by a British-born citizen as Islamic terrorism, but it was, according to her, a perversion of a great faith. In UNDP and in the UN as a whole, we strongly believe that disempowerment, be it economic or political, as well as rising inequalities leading to identity marginalizations, are some of the deeper drivers of conflict today. And this is why, as an organization, we are fully behind what is now called the Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The key issue to understand about these goals is that they are not 17 independent objectives, but are strongly interlinked and interdependent, meaning that none of them and what they underpin will be reached unless all goals are addressed and progress made. Peace, or the absence of conflict, is only one of the 17 goals. The issue of inequality is and has its own goal. Poverty reduction, the same. Economic empowerment, the same. But beyond those 17 goals and their interdependence, I think the most important message of the SDGs is the concept of leaving no one behind. And this is, I think, extremely relevant to the discussion we're having here. Leaving no one behind calls for what we call inclusive development, that we believe is probably the best and the only way to bring peace to our world. But what do we mean by inclusive development? We mean development that considers people not as passive beneficiaries, but as actors of their own development. This obviously requires their participation, but beyond participation, their empowerment, socially, economically, politically. And what result does this bring? It leads to a reduction of inequality in its broadest definition. Now, to measure inequalities, most often we use what we call the Gini coefficient, measuring income inequalities. But in my view, it raises two challenges. First, the Gini coefficient is a national figure. It does not tell us much, if anything, about what is going on at the disaggregated levels of population. And such disaggregation may be by geographic location, by caste, by religion, by gender, or any other dimension. And second, inequality is not just about income. It applies to all dimensions of human development and human rights. What we need to look at carefully is what is happening to such inequalities between groups and within groups. If the between group inequality is high, we see then the creation of alienation between the groups. If within group inequality is low, it often creates a strong sense of identification within that group. And I would venture to say that both alienation and identification together are both spoilers for building inclusive societies. they cause what we call polarization. And this polarization, back to my point, is one of the main reasons behind conflicts. And the divide between the rich and the poor, both at the level of the individuals or at the level of the countries, is becoming deeper and deeper. You've seen, I'm sure, the article a few weeks back that we live in a world today where the 8 richest individuals on our planet possess the same wealth as the poorest 50% of the total global population. That is our world today. At the level of countries, poor countries feel more and more alienated by the rich ones. This leads to the creation of complex concepts such as the common but differentiated responsibilities, which are needed if we want to reach consensus on global matters. This is exactly what I mean by alienation and identification leading to polarization. They contradict the spirit of leaving no one behind. So where do we go from here? Let's bring it back a little bit to Nepal. On the Gini coefficient aspects, Nepal is actually showing some good results. The Gini coefficient in Nepal is established at 32.8, according to the latest Human Development Report, which was just launched 3 days ago by UNDP. And obviously, the lower the Gini coefficient, the better for a country. Right? So Nepal has a better coefficient than Thailand at 37.9, better than the US at 41.1, even better than my own country, France. We stand at 33.1. But as I explained earlier, the Gini coefficient, because it looks only at income inequality, does not, in my view, reflect adequate reality about inequalities. And I'm sure this ranking would surprise somebody who knows something about Nepal. In the Human Development Report, we use what we call the coefficient of human inequality, which aggregates data of life expectancy, education, and income. And then we start seeing a very different picture. Nepal is at 25.8, higher, therefore not good, higher than Thailand at 20.2, higher than the US at 12.9, and higher than France at 9.3. Which clearly shows that inequalities in the context of Nepal is a complex matter, and reducing them requires policies and practices that address much more than economic growth, but contribute to building stronger social cohesion, respectful of the diversity of Nepal, which I believe makes its richness and potentially its greatness. Now, I could go on and entertain you about all those matters, but I think Lawrence and Sujeev at some point will kick me down. So I will close with 3 simple, and I hope not too provocative messages, which I hope you will agree with me are relevant for Nepal. First, we need to underline how conflict can only be avoided if societies are less unequal and if citizens are more empowered and involved in decisions that affect their lives. Second, beyond empowerment, we must make the point that conflict can only be avoided when citizens are given a real and genuine reason to hope for a better future. Third and finally, I cannot avoid highlighting, and I hope no one takes this personally in the room, that conflict can only be avoided when leaders in countries or in communities demonstrate a genuine commitment to care about the people they lead. Now, all this may sound very simple and maybe a bit naive, but I think in the world we live, a bit of that naivete would be welcomed back. Now, if we are successful in seeing attitude change towards those 3 principles, I actually trust that we will see less conflict, more development. Now, we all have a role to play, and I'll give you a 4th and bonus message. because we all have a role to play, today, 25th March, we will mark tonight at 8:30 Earth Hour. David talked about climate change, the ambassador talked about climate change. We can all make a small contribution. So I invite you all, 8:30 local time here in Nepal, ideally for an hour, but I understand that maybe you won't be able to hold an hour in the dark, but switch off the lights. Switch off everything that's electric. In your home, in your business, in your embassy, wherever it is. Show that as individuals, we can make a difference. Thank you very much.